For some time now, I have heard a narrative in the right, from well-respected American figures, indicating a deep reverence for European roots. American living, they say, proves empty, devoid of an ethnos. Europe, on the other hand, has this and a long history of civilization. In Europe, you are never far from your roots, or so it is said. You are standing on the shoulders of giants. Hence, you see among many Americans a desire and sentiment for the old world. To me, though, this sentiment is rotten. Vienna. Frequently touted as the most livable city in the world by neoliberal institutions such as the Economist Intelligence Unit, it is remarkable for its level of domination over Austria, with 3 million citizens in the metropolitan area towering over the relatively small Austrian population of 9 million. It is also one of the fastest growing cities in Europe. The city can be seen as the apotheosis of the liberal worldview, the ultimate form of modern existence. And it manages all this while being notably affordable. It is also, I will confess, one of my favourite cities, housing an opera house to which I have great sentimental attachment. The city is, for all intents and purposes, the perfect steelman of the liberal end vision. It is doubtless relatively competently governed, it is affordable, has good public transport, and offers everything a modern city should, or so the narrative goes. It is also an example. Too often, critiques of cities default to the standard high prices or low affordability. Falling into this mode places you on a collision course, only with a particular set of policies. But all this is perfectly addressable from the point of view of a neoliberal, a matter of competence. When we rely too heavily on a measure like cost of living, we too often fall into the language of a managerial technocrat. To him, there will always be a lever somewhere, that can be pulled, or a policy instituted, allowing them to stay in their perfect ideological bubble. The manager by heart will salivate as soon as a numerical critique is made, and he is sure to have an appropriate chart and theory for the occasion. And Vienna will be what is pointed to. The city, for its Red Vienna roots, when Social Democrats channeled money towards large building projects, has become a material paradise. The architecture of the period certainly doesn't inspire, but is the antithesis to Mussolini's restructuring of Rome, the pinnacle of form over function. Indeed, it allows one to claim that all that is needed is to reduce regulation on housing, increase state subsidies, or at the more extreme end, enact rent control. Yet there is a more fundamental issue with urban centricity. I have spent most of my life in either academic towns or major cities. I have lived, albeit briefly, in the great city of Vienna, and I believe I am not calling it a necropolis for nothing. Ask yourself, what does it mean for a city to be alive? Let's take a step back into Viennese history. After World War I, Austria-Hungary was dissolved in the treaties of Saint-Germain and Trianon, reducing an empire of some 50 million people to a motley collection of states, including a tiny Austrian nation shorn of much of its Bohemian industrial heartland, and denied the right to unify with Germany. Vienna, once the centre of an empire, was now an overburdened capital in a small, weak European state. All of a sudden, its great marble monuments and glistering palaces became a reminder of a bitter defeat and a long imperial legacy whose days had passed. Before it stood an identity crisis. In came the Social Democrats, the SDAP, who have since dominated Viennese government. As with many other social democratic parties, the SDAP emerged from a unification of a labour movement. They instituted a policy of subsidised housing, building 65,000 developments by 1934, in a period known as Red Vienna. The buildings were focused on fulfilling social needs, producing a raw, rough aesthetic. The most famous of these, the Karl Marx Hof, was designed to model the aesthetics of a castle. This was the era of the Gemeindebauten. Contrast this for a moment with its opposite, a topic on which I am sure to touch in the future, Mussolini's redesign of Rome. He cleared out the slums, opened up the streets, and designed multiple monumental buildings. Beauty and eternity first. To go back to Vienna, the era also came with significant educational reform, including in 1927 when schools were reshaped by Otto Glockel, a social democratic reformer. He redesigned education based on progressive policies, aspiring to equality of opportunity, professional teaching standards, and the elimination of educational privilege. In addition, amenities were socialized, taxation made progressive, and Victor Adler's, the founder of the SDAP's dream, came closer to fruition. All this made Vienna a veritable mecca for social democrats. Of course, this came at a cost, and an already fiscally overburdened Austria faced real crisis, exacerbated by the economic turbulence of the Great Depression. As a result of economic and political instability, alongside a real lack of faith in the democratic regime, Engelbert Dollfuss took center stage. Dollfuss, the leader of the Christian Social Party, the other significant interwar political force, alongside the Social Democrats, was Chancellor across 1932-33. He turned towards authoritarianism after instability in Parliament proved too much. He ruled largely on the basis of emergency decrees, and slowly monopolized power, creating the Vaterlandische Front and banning all opposition. He was, to be clear, a fascist in the truest sense, seeking to safeguard Austria's independence with the help of his Italian ally, a little-known bold socialist editor of Avanti, Benito Mussolini. Few know of Italian-German tensions over Austria, tensions that would be exacerbated by Dollfuss's eventual assassination by Austrian Nazis, seeking to achieve Anschluss along the fatherland. However, after the souring of Western Italian relations over Ethiopia, Anschluss became a clear inevitability. It is worth noting that a significant portion of Austrians wanted union with Germany. Even Adler himself favoured unification after 1918, and Hitler was greeted with cheers and flowers when entering Vienna. Austrians were particularly zealous contributors to the National Socialist cause, notably producing the logistician of the Holocaust, Adolf Eichmann, famously tried in Jerusalem. This fact was buried in the memory of the Austrians after the war, who proclaimed themselves the Nazis' first victims. Vienna largely escaped the severe damage dealt to cities such as Warsaw or Dresden during World War II, with the Soviet army entering the city in the dying days of the war. After a brief period of Cold War peril, it also fortunately escaped prolonged Soviet occupation, with a full Red Army withdrawal secured in exchange for neutrality in 1955. The city became a playground for foreign intelligence services, but this was a different sort of war and a different story for a different day. Thus emerges the fraught face of the city of Vienna, a prelude to its takeover by monoculture. What else is left for us today? Beautiful parks and palaces, imperial paved streets, and signs pointing to the Sisi Museum. A funny sight indeed, perhaps emblematic that a stuck-up spoiled princess who abhorred dutiful life, abandoned her children and husband, and chose to retreat from what was expected of her, would become a proto-feminist icon. Still, visitors come to see the shadows of the luscious lives of the Habsburgs, to glimpse into the past of these dedicated people. But while tourism booms, the city itself has been swallowed up. It offers a perfect view of luxury and experience of culture, but what here is authentic? In 2025, Muslim children for the first time outnumbered native-born children in Vienna nurseries. Teachers report extensive language barriers, with few children knowing German well. The demographics of the city are troubling, and immigration is not likely to be stemmed. This is the living face of Vienna. With it, of course, come associated crimes and conflicts between Chechen and Syrian refugee gangs. Perhaps, though, this is just the price of city living. But there is an even more looming spectre than this. It is not that Vienna is somehow culturally Islamic, but that subcultures are able to exist in a vacuum defined by the urban cosmopolitan. There is nothing to assimilate into. Think of an average European city. What culture is there? Does it differ markedly across Paris, London, San Francisco, and indeed Vienna? Burlesque shows, drag, craft beers, various forms of consumption and exhibition, masking fundamentally a naked ape. A consumer who is often too degraded to enjoy even his own consumption. After all, is it not a shock that after sexual liberation, sex itself seems to be declining? Without the rituals and taboo that once played a role in our desire, pleasure itself is merely physical. Social democracy asserts power to the people, but when people lose their humanity, what use is any comfort? Many authors have eloquently pointed to the stripping of our identities. From Marxian alienation of workers to Bauman's observation of liquid modernity depriving us fundamentally of our professional veneers. All this is just as strongly felt in this city when you scratch underneath the surface. For any place to be the epicenter of everywhere is to be nowhere. The cosmopolitan city is the swamp of grey sludge, a warmish goo in which the citizens of formerly great metropolises bathe. One hardly lives in Vienna, merely on it. This is a city of museums, with a whole quarter dedicated to them. And what are museums? Two experiences stick out to me. In the Imperial Treasury, I saw a wooden crucifix in the robe of a knighthood order. The first I remember of its silent inconspicuousness. It seemed to me tragic that it will not be prayed to, that it will be passed over, perhaps someday forgotten or destroyed, by a society that is losing the ability to understand the sacred. The second, an ornate robe, had next to it a description of how knighthood was used as a reward. It did not give rise to understandings of the attitudes of past times, of the appreciation of honour, genuine reverence, or piety. Indeed, as we become more empty, we can only consume the past. We certainly cannot understand it. And consume we do. Crowds of people stick selfies next to the most ornate and flashy of artifacts. Our ancestors stand next to us here as titans, and we see them only through the lens of cynicism. As pointed to by Fischer in capitalist realism, an object is accorded iconic status only when it is deprived of any function or context. Vienna is a city transformed into a museum piece. Defenders of the city, and of our times, will point to its many beauties and exhibits, and the comforts it affords. You can, after all, view the cradle of the Emperor Napoleon's son by his Austrian wife. You can see the beautiful jewels of the Austrian monarchs, loiter in their many stately rooms. Indeed, they will say, the houses are well utilized. Their prices are reasonable. It is livable. Is that not enough? What need have we for past trinkets? What good is clutching at what is now gone with the wind? What use is there for subtlety of purpose? After all, this is something the spectative consumer is unable to view immediately, hence to understand. Like a gremlin, he stretches out his hands in discontent and boredom. Much better to take pictures for social media reels. Eternal values do not make the GDP go up. The optimists on the right will point to Austria waking up, the rise of the FPO. Of course, this ignores the fundamental irony that the old city, the crucible of Austrian culture, has negligible FPO support. Nor will they point out the consistent failure of populists like Maloney when in power. Without the meat of true ideology and identity, how can we reconstruct? Vienna is merely a mausoleum on which we build tents, like savages in a post-apocalypse. The real beliefs of the past serve mainly as an aesthetic filter to the present. We put our ear to history and hear only silence, and the few that perceive the whispers are merely schizophrenics. But you, dear viewer, whether left or right, might be interested in more. I will not hide my biases or imperfections, nor that I am new to this form and function. Perhaps, though, if only in a small way, I can provide a candle, trusting by God's grace that it will not be snuffed out.